This episode of Anchored in Milwaukee, the official podcast of FC Milwaukee Torrance Soccer, is sponsored by Atlanta Mortgage, Sobelman's Pub, Associated Bank, and Orenda Cafe. If you'd like to learn more about sponsoring the club, please email sales@milwaukeetorrent.com. Welcome. It is Anchored in Milwaukee, the official podcast for all things FC Milwaukee Torrance Soccer. We are Milwaukee's only professional outdoor soccer team, boasting a men and a women's club. If it's your first time, we are happy to have you, and thanks for joining us. And if you're a returning listener, welcome back. Your FC Milwaukee Torrent continue to make waves both on the pitch and off the pitch. So we have a lot of things we're going to go over today. Our guest is John Howard Fusco. John is a writer for Protagonist Soccer and also the co-host of the podcast, The Knights Who Say Nisa, about the National Independent Soccer Association. John is going to be joining us to talk more about the Independent Cup, which is an independent soccer tournament that the Torrent are going to be a part of this year. But before we can get to that, we have some games that were played that we need to get you updated on. We will start with the women, who played two games since the last time we recorded. The first being Saturday, June 15th, when the women went to Chicago to take on Chicago City SC. The Torrent jumped out to an early lead 1-0 when leading scorer Jordan Raleigh connected into the back of the net on the 7th minute. The lead was not to last, though, as Chicago City answered just 8 minutes later in the 15th minute, leveling the score at 1-1. The two teams remained deadlocked at the half, but the home team found a winner in the second half and took the match 2-1. This is the first loss for either Torrent team in the 2021 regular season. The next Sunday, the women were looking to unleash a little bit of their frustration on the Green Bay Glory as they made the trek up to the Fox Valley. The women were confident in their matchup, having beaten the Glory at Hart Park back on May 30th, 2-1. Despite the 90-degree weather, the Torrent played hard and would take no prisoners. Jordan Raleigh continued her hot streak, scoring in the 3rd and 42nd minute to secure the brace and give the Torrent a 2-0 lead heading into the half. Then in the 74th minute, Jelena Sever put the game away by putting the Torrent up 3-0. That score would hold and would secure not only the clean sheet, but the 3 points. Jordan Raleigh's start to the season can only be described as incredible, as she now has 4 goals in 3 games and has yet to be shut out against any opponent. The Torrent currently sit in 3rd place in their division. They are only 1 point behind 2nd place Chicago Dutch Lions, the Torrent having 6 points and the Dutch Lions having 7. The Chicago Red Stars reserves are on top right now with 12 points. We switch now to the men, who played 1 game since we last recorded, but they were looking to maintain a perfect record as they hosted FC Columbus at Hart Park. This was a rematch of the season opener where the Torrent won 2-0 in Columbus. This time, FC Columbus was not going to be shut out. They took an early lead in the 17th minute. Alex Fillion made sure that lead was not going to last, as he leveled the score in the 27th minute off a corner kick. The game looked like it might result in the first draw of the season for either Torrent team, but Isaac Pareja got a late goal just 5 minutes before stoppage time to take the lead. Pareja's goal would be enough to clinch the 3 points and keep the men's team a perfect 5-0. The men now sit atop of the Great Lakes standings with 15 points, followed by Carpathia with 12 points, Panathinaikos Chicago with 6 points, FC Columbus in 4th with 3 points, and FC Indiana in last, still looking to get their first point of the season. Last week, we shared the announcement that your FC Milwaukee Torrents would be entering the Independent Cup. The Independent Cup is exactly what it sounds like, a tournament of independent teams. It's going to be entering its 2nd year of existence, and it is put together by NISA, a 3rd-tier soccer league with teams throughout the nation. Since that announcement, we've gotten a little bit more detail. We know that the Torrent will be in the Midwest, and they're going to be playing Chicago House AC, Union Dubuque FC, and Med City FC. We now have dates and locations for those games, and tickets are on sale. The Torrent will start the tournament at home against Chicago House AC on July 9th at 7 p.m. They'll then travel to Dubuque to take on Union Dubuque FC July 14th at 6 p.m. and then finish their 3-game set against Med City FC at Hart Park July 27th at 7 p.m. But to give you a little bit more information on NISA and the tournament itself, we are happy to welcome our guest today. So joining us now to talk more about the Independent Cup and NISA itself, we have a writer for Protagonist Soccer and the co-host of the podcast, The Knights Who Say NISA. It is John Howard Fusco. John, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Luke, how are we doing this evening?
We are good, and we are excited to have you here. So first off, just tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into soccer writing and podcasting.
Okay, well, I'm of a certain age, and there'll be people in the audience who will recognize this, that I got into soccer back when a little show on public television called Soccer Bait in Germany was out, which is weird now to think that public television was showing sports, but this was back late 70s, early 80s. And so I was watching German soccer when I was a little kid. And then I picked up on NASL Part 1. And then I did pick up on MLS and the national team in the 90s. But with MLS came the Open Cup, and found out there were all these little teams that were clubs that were playing that I'd never heard of, and got excited about that, and eventually wanted to know more and more about them. And eventually along came protagonists who were looking for writers, and I said, hey, I write. Let's try this. So it's been fun, a lot of fun with protagonists. I love Dan and the folks there. They're good people, all trying to give a voice to lower league clubs. And now I watch a lot more lower league than I watch MLS now. In fact, I hardly watch MLS at all anymore. So they've converted me now too.
Perfect. And tell us a little bit about your show and how that came to be, and how the focus came to kind of be on NISA, because, there are a ton of independent soccer clubs and leagues out there now. So how did you guys get together and start your show?
Yeah, so Dan Vaughn and I both really picked up on NISA right from the get-go. And he'd already been doing podcasts for protagonists. And he was like, hey, you want to come on? We'll talk about this, since we started talking about NISA anyway. And I was like, sure, let's do it. So the early shows are pretty rough. I was calling in on my phone from a parking lot in a library, so it was not exactly like top-notch quality, but we progressed since then. And then Dan Krill came on because Dan's really good in following the player movements and statistics, and his knowledge was great. And I said, we should bring him on, and he's been a natural ever since. So it's kind of grown organically. We were just kind of just having fun with it. And now we've developed a bit of a following. And really right now, in terms of NISA, we're one of the few podcasts that really focus just on NISA. And we believe in NISA. We believe in what they're trying to do as an independent alternative as far as professional soccer. And we really like to see how it develops. The landscape's getting crowded all the time, and we'll have to see what happens, but we're really pulling for them.
Tell us a little bit more about what you mean when you talk about what NISA is doing to kind of distinguish themselves in this independent market, because it does seem very unique to, the USLs and some of the other options that are out there.
Yeah. So, people who follow soccer understand that basically around the rest of the world, clubs are independent. They move up and down leagues through promotion, relegation. In the U.S., it's not a concept that we really have, with the exception of some regional, and amateur soccer leagues. But the major sports in America are all closed franchise leagues. You don't move up anywhere. You don't move down anywhere. The players may move, but the clubs don't. So to try to develop a professional league that possibly has that kind of movement is very unique to the American sports landscape. So there's still a lot that has to be worked out for it to actually work, mainly with the professional league standards that U.S. Soccer has set down. But they're going to see if it can actually work, and based on the Independent Cup and how other people have looked at it, there seems to be interest. There seems to be people who think that maybe this gives a shot. There's a long way to go. The league is still in its early stages. They've had 2 seasons, shot down because of COVID. They've had a couple clubs that have left, or one that had to fold because their investor pulled out. So they've had their early bumps and bruises. Their hope is that this coming fall and spring, can be a real full season that they can have, and to go from there. They have more clubs that are joining, so there seems to be an interest in it. But what it comes down to is that to really try to establish a league of independent clubs, where there's no strong centralized focus, where the teams are not carbon copies, they're not cookie cutter. They have their own independent ways of doing things, and we'll see. It is, again, it's unique to the American sports systems, but to the rest of the world, this is nothing unusual.
How's it been received by fans? Because, as we keep hitting on, it is very unique, and a lot of these leagues can seem rather cookie cutter down to having the exact same jersey, just in different colors among every team.
Yeah.
Yeah. How are fans? How are fans reacting to seeing this league? How is it growing among the fandom?
It's interesting because whenever we're used to when a new league starts, that everything is new. The league is new, the teams are new, everything is new. With NISA, you had really a hodgepodge. You had a few new teams, but then you had some existing teams that were coming up from the amateur side that had a strong following already. Your Detroit Cities, your Chattanoogas already have strong followings. So for them, they're still doing very well. For the clubs that are new, it's kind of a mixed bag. You're seeing a club like Cal United who are drawing 2,000 or 3,000. Now they're not brand new. They had played a couple years prior. But then you have clubs like LA Force, which is now had existed for years as a youth system, and now this is their senior team. Jerry style as far as a following for them. So you have a mixed bag. Now they started showing games on beIN Sports Extra. They started that with the fall playoffs, the fall tournament, and supposedly the ratings were better than what was expected. So I guess you could take from it that there is some kind of audience there, but it's still in early stages. I don't think USL or MLS have anything to worry about just yet, but the hope is that as it grows, that they become a bigger player in the American landscape, the soccer landscape.
Well, and you've talked about how you got drawn to the lower leagues through the U.S. Open Cup. And NISA did a big step in kind of filling the hole last year because there was no U.S. Open Cup due to COVID and the pandemic.
Yeah.
But that is when the Independent Cup came around, which is what the Torrents are going to be entering this year. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the Independent Cup and what that was like last year?
Yeah, this was a great concept, and I'm glad that they're going to keep it going and expanding it. So last year, Independent Cup, as the name indicates, it was for independent clubs, professional for NISA, and then amateur, coming from different leagues across the country, whether it's a national league or a regional league. And they had 4 regions. It was focused primarily on the eastern part of the country. And it was just a place for opportunity for independent clubs to play in a little tournament. Now, each region did their own thing in terms of how they determined a winner. Some just had a straight, top of the table, you win. Some had a playoff system. So they even allowed within each region that they could choose who would be the winner of the region. So it really was an attempt to give independent clubs a forum, give them a place to have extra eyeballs on them, and to get a little notoriety. For someone like myself, it was great to see clubs that I wasn't really familiar with, and watch them play. As an example, GAFA FC, which is a club out of Jackson, Mississippi, which I had never heard of prior to the tournament. And then I started reading about them, and I was like, this is an interesting club. So, and they actually did very well. I think they ended up winning their group. So it was good to see these little clubs get some prominence and actually do well in some cases. So that's what I'm really excited about this year, because it's expanded now to 9 regions. So it's more clubs, a number of clubs which I've never seen and don't really know about. So I'm sure there'll be surprises. I'm sure there'll be the clubs that will not expect to do anything and will do something really special. But it's just exciting to see that there is such an interest in being part of this. And I think for NISA, I think this has just been a great concept. And I think it only helps their brand and help to promote the idea that they are really supporting the independent soccer club out there.
Nice. And as you mentioned, they are expanding greatly to 9 different regions, 4 teams per region. The Torrents are going to be in a region with a new NISA team, which is Chicago House AC, and then they're also going to be playing Union Dubuque FC and Med City FC, which is out of Rochester, Minnesota. So a lot of unknowns for the Torrent heading into this tournament. The only actual NISA team is Chicago House, which is a brand new team, so it's kind of hard to know what to expect out of them. In fact, when we first made the announcement the Torrent were going to be in this, Chicago House didn't really even have an announced player yet. I think they had one announced player on their roster. Now that has changed, but I mean, we're a couple weeks out from that first game. What is kind of, as a little bit more of a NISA insider than us, what is kind of the buzz around Chicago House? Is there anything we should be able to expect out of them?
Well, here's the thing. We had a similar situation earlier this year with Stumptown. Now, Stumptown had been a club that existed prior, had existed before, had gone dark, and now have been reborn with basically a whole new set of players. And very similar situation where they're coming to the little spring tournament, and we didn't really know what to expect of them. And they came out and they played really well, and they've continued to play well into the season. So it's hard to know. I think they're up to about 7 or 8 players. I think they have a couple players that have come over from the Puerto Rican national team. So you're right. It's really hard to gauge what they will bring. But the fact of the matter is it could be very good. It could be a work in progress. We don't really know. The fact of the matter is that the club that will play in this tournament will probably not be what the club looks like when they start in the league proper in the fall. So I'm sure they're going to give a lot of different trialists an opportunity to play. But I think that's what makes it really interesting, because we really don't know what we're going to get with Chicago. So I think that region is very wide open. Just because you have one professional club in there doesn't mean that the amateurs can't have a shot at them, since they're still very new.
Well, and the Torrent will definitely are riding a hot streak right now, as they're currently undefeated, and everyone here can cherish knowing maybe we can be the first ever loss in Chicago House history, since we will be their first match. So I'm sure everyone's looking forward to beating them. Long term, the U.S. Open Cup still hasn't returned. It's not coming back this year. I'm assuming it'll most likely come back next year. But one thing clubs like the Torrents have noticed is, we have to qualify just to qualify for it. So long term, I mean, is this something where NISA thinks, the Independent Cup can fill a gap for a lot of these teams that, don't seem to be able to find a place in the U.S. Open Cup every year?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. And it seems like more and more we go out, it seems like less and less amateur clubs are part of the Open Cup, which is a shame, because the Open Cup is really more for them than it is for MLS. MLS can, honestly, they could probably take or leave it. If they had their choice, you could probably, if you talk to them behind closed doors, they probably would say they'd probably rather not be part of it. In the early days of MLS, it seemed more important to them, but now it seems like more of an annoyance than anything else. It's really more for the small amateur clubs and for the lower league clubs. So I think that the independent tournament, I think this really can be a showcase for them, because I think the focus is on the lower league independent clubs, which is what the Open Cup should be about. When we think about what's the other big tournament that we love to watch in the U.S., we love March Madness, right? Why do we love it? Because we love to see the smaller schools beat the bigger schools. That's what makes it fun. If the bigger schools just kept winning and that was it, I don't think it would be as fun as you see the lower clubs or the lower basketball teams have a shot. I remember in 1999 when Rochester won the Open Cup and beat Columbus. I thought that was tremendous. That was really fun. Unfortunately, it's the last time it's happened, but I think that's what the tournament's about. And I think, unfortunately, the Open Cup is losing that, the way that they've been handling qualifications upon qualifications upon qualifications, and letting in just a small number of lower league clubs in, while, making all the MLS teams participate. So I think the Independent Cup can fill that gap and really be the showcase.
So speaking of for this year, obviously there's going to be a lot of Torrent fans, paying attention to the Torrent, but they may not have been aware of the Independent Cup last year. And there's so many teams this year. Who are maybe some groups that you're looking forward to, or some teams that you're looking forward to watching in this year's version of it?
Well, I hate to be diplomatic about this, but I think they all are interesting. But me personally, I'm looking at the Mid-Atlantic because this year, I got a team from my home state of New Jersey in there. I have Atlantic City FC, which is just 40 minutes down the road from me. And the Maryland Bobcats are in that region. So Dan Creel and I have something to really go against each other from. I'm hoping Dan maybe can come up for the game in July. It's being played here in Jersey. So hopefully he can make the trip up from Maryland. So that region I'm definitely looking into. Of course, Great Lakes, Detroit City, FC Buffalo, Cleveland, the Rust Belt Derby. That's always a good time. Now the Southeast is interesting because it's 3 of the 4 teams that played last year. Chattanooga, Savannah, and Soda City all played in last year's tournament. But this year we have Atletico Atlanta, which recently changed their name, and this is the club that won UPSL most recently, the national tournament. So this is no slouch. This is a legitimate, top-notch amateur club. So Chattanooga better watch out because don't sleep on them. And now you have the West Coast, which we didn't have at all last year. You have 3 regions out in the West Coast participating, including Space United, which for me was, I honestly thought that team's kind of a lark, kind of a fun thing, but they seem to be very serious about developing that as a club. So it'll be really interesting to see them on the field. And the one that I probably knew the least about, which is Maja out in California. Evidently, our friend Steven, who writes with us on Protagonist, says that that team is legit. So watch out for them. So it's fun because they all have their own little interesting stories, and I think that's what's great about the tournament. Clubs you don't know about, and you kind of find the history of them, and you're like, oh, okay, really interesting. So I guess for me, Mid-Atlantic, just because I have a more of a rooting interest in a club that's close to home.
Well, that's fair, and there are going to be a ton of matchups. It's going to start early July. The Torrent's first game is July 9th, Hart Park versus Chicago AC. Tickets are available now. It's a 7 p.m. kickoff. It should be one of the most memorable games of the season for the Torrent, so it's one you don't want to miss. John Howard Fusco, thank you for joining us. If people want to check out your writing or check out your podcast, how do they find you?
Yeah, really just look for Protagonist Soccer, and that's where you're going to find all of us there. That's where you find the podcast. Find us on the social media as well through Protagonist Soccer. You can find me at JohnHF_Jersey. That's my soccer podcast, or I should say my soccer handle on Twitter. I have another handle that's completely unrelated to this, so don't go there. If you want soccer, go to that one.
Perfect. We will definitely do that. Thank you for joining us today. Now let's get you ready for the upcoming matches that both the men and women's team are going to be playing in the next few weeks. The FC Milwaukee Torrent men's team will next play June 19th at Chicago Panathinaikos, 7 p.m. kickoff. Then a return to Hart Park on June 27th against FC Indiana. The women will be in Chicago as well on the 19th as they take on the Chicago Dutch Lions at 6 p.m. They then return for the first of a rivalry match between Milwaukee teams. They will be at Hart Park to take on the Milwaukee Bavarians. Tickets for all games are now on sale or can be purchased at the gate. We look forward to seeing you there. That is going to do it for this episode of Anchored in Milwaukee, the official podcast of your FC Milwaukee Torrent. We thank you for listening. If you'd like to help the show, please subscribe, tell a friend, give us a rating. We're available wherever you download your podcasts or on YouTube. Special thanks to our guest, John Howard Fusco of Protagonist Soccer and the podcast The Knights Who Say Nisa. As always, we want to thank our sponsors, Atlanta Mortgage, Sobelman's Pub, Associated Bank, and Arenda Cafe. If you'd like to learn more about sponsoring the club, please email sales@MilwaukeeTorrent.com. This episode was edited and produced by Jaden Stevenson. I'm your host, Luke. Thanks, and until next time, stay anchored together.